The first time Elena Ortiz told me not to open my daughter's front door, I thought she was protecting a crime scene. The second time she said it, she looked straight at the brass key in my hand and told me my daughter was alive. Stop, Mr. Avery. I had one foot on the porch and the key halfway to the lock. Rain slid from the edge of the roof in steady silver cords. Across Juniper Lane, the maples were just beginning to turn, and a delivery van crawled past as though this were an ordinary Thursday morning in an ordinary Richmond suburb. Elena stood at the bottom of the steps in slippers and a navy raincoat thrown over pink pajamas. She was 68, a retired middle school librarian, and not a woman given to theatrical entrances. Her gray hair was wet against her forehead. One hand clutched her phone. The other was raised toward me. "Don't go inside," she said. "I haven't heard from Leah in 4 days." My voice sounded sharper than I intended. "Grant says she went to a wellness retreat and doesn't want calls. That doesn't sound like my daughter." "It isn't." I looked at the dark windows. Leah's blue Subaru was gone. Grant's black SUV was gone too. A cardboard parcel sat swollen by the rain beside the garage. Nothing moved behind the curtains. "Then where is she?" Elena came up one step. "In my guest room." For a moment, the rain seemed to go silent. "What?" "She's alive. She's hurt, but she's alive," Elena swallowed. "And her husband thinks she died Tuesday night." I gripped the porch rail. At 71, I had learned that fear did not always arrive like a blow. Sometimes it entered politely, sat down inside your chest, and made everything around it seem very far away. "Take me to her." "I will. But first, put the key away. There may be evidence inside." And Grant came back at 2 this morning. My camera caught him carrying things through the garage. I put the key in my coat pocket. My fingers would not stop shaking. Elena led me across the street. Her brick ranch house smelled of coffee and eucalyptus. On the living room sofa lay a folded blanket, a first aid kit, and a pair of muddy women's sneakers. I recognized the white paint on the soles. Leah had helped repaint the loading dock office at Avery Cold Storage the month before. Elena opened the guest room door. My daughter sat propped against 2 pillows, wearing an oversized t-shirt and sweatpants Elena had given her. A purple bruise ran from her left temple into her hairline. Her right wrist was wrapped. She looked smaller than she had at 10 years old, yet her eyes were alert. "Dad!" I crossed the room in 3 steps and stopped just short of grabbing her. "Where can I touch you?" That question made her cry. "My left shoulder," she whispered. I put one arm around her carefully, her forehead pressed against my chest. For almost a minute, neither of us spoke. Then Leah said, "Grant tried to kill me." I sat beside her. Elena closed the door and remained near it. Leah told me what had happened in pieces. Tuesday evening, Grant had insisted they drive to their cabin at Lake Chesdin to talk privately. Their marriage had been deteriorating for months, but he had become unusually gentle. He poured coffee into a travel mug for her. 20 minutes into the drive, her arms felt heavy and the road began to blur. "I asked him to pull over," she said. "He told me to sleep." She woke in the passenger seat near the old public boat ramp, the car rolling slowly downhill. Grant was outside. The driver's door stood open. He had wedged something against the accelerator and pointed the car toward the water. Leah unfastened her seatbelt, pushed herself across the console, and fell out through the open driver's side seconds before the Subaru struck the wooden barrier and slid into the lake. Grant had been walking toward his SUV, parked beyond the trees. In the rain and darkness, he did not see her crawl into the drainage ditch. "I heard him on the phone," she said. "He said, 'It's done. We have until Monday.'" Her own phone was gone. Her purse was still in the Subaru. She followed the tree line until she reached a service road, then hid when she saw Grant's headlights circling back. Hours later, a landscaping crew found her. She was confused, frightened, and afraid that Grant had contacts at the hospital. One of the workers drove her to an urgent care clinic in Petersburg, where she gave only her first name. The clinic found no fracture and recommended an emergency room because of the head injury. Leah refused. "I know that was foolish," she said, "but I could only think about Sophie and Caleb." My grandchildren, 14 and 11, were supposed to be staying with Grant's mother in Williamsburg for the school break. Grant had texted Leah 3 days earlier that his mother wanted extra time with them. "They're safe," Elena said. I called the school counselor from a number Grant doesn't know. The children are with his mother, but she believes Leah is at a retreat. Leah had reached Elena's house shortly before dawn Wednesday. She chose the neighbor because Grant considered Elena harmless and because her late husband had once installed a gate between their back fences. Elena had cleaned Leah's injuries, photographed everything, and persuaded her to speak with Detective Renee Park, whose direct number Elena had from a neighborhood fraud presentation. "Why didn't anyone call me?" I asked. Leah looked down. "Because Grant told me you were involved." The words landed harder than anything else she had said. "Involved? How?" "He showed me emails, messages between you and him about selling the company. He said you wanted me out because I was blocking the Harbor Meridian offer. He had a draft board resolution with your signature." Avery Cold Storage was the business my wife, Margaret, and I had built over 38 years. We began with one refrigerated truck and a leased warehouse. By the time Margaret died, we operated 3 facilities, employed 92 people, and handled produce and medicine across Central Virginia. I still owned 41%. Leah owned 31%. A management trust for employees held 18%. Grant owned 10% through shares Leah had transferred to him when they refinanced their home. Harbor Meridian Partners had offered $13.6 million for our riverfront warehouse and distribution rights. Leah opposed the sale because the buyer planned to close 2 facilities and eliminate at least 50 jobs. I opposed it for the same reason. "I never signed a resolution," I said, "and I have not exchanged one private email with Grant about selling to Harbor Meridian." Leah nodded slowly. "I believe you now. I didn't on Tuesday, that hurt, but I did not defend myself. Grant had built the lie from materials I had handed him over years, old signatures, familiar phrases, real disagreements between my daughter and me. A convincing fraud rarely invented everything. It arranged pieces of truth around one central lie. "What happens Monday?" Elena asked. Leah reached under the blanket and handed me a photograph of a document displayed on Grant's laptop. The heading was blurred, but the figures were clear. $13,600,000 purchase consideration, $2,400,000 key person life insurance, voting proxy upon death or incapacity, closing authorization. "Grant increased the life insurance policy on me 8 months ago," Leah said. "He told me the bank required it for our business loan. If I die, he receives $2.4 million. Under our shareholder agreement, my voting rights passed temporarily to my estate representative. Grant changed my estate papers 6 weeks ago. He made himself executor. Without your lawyer? He brought a mobile notary to the house after giving me something for a migraine. I remember signing a medical release. I don't remember the rest. My anger rose hot and useless. I wanted to cross the street, break every lock, and wait in Grant's kitchen. Instead, I took out my phone and called my attorney, Miriam Cole. Miriam had represented our company for 17 years. She answered on the second ring. "Thomas? I need you to listen without interrupting." When I finished, she was silent for 3 seconds. "Do not contact Grant," she said. "Do not enter the house. Do not call the board yet. Put Leah on." Miriam spoke to my daughter for nearly 20 minutes. Then she asked Elena to photograph the image from Grant's computer, Leah's injuries, the muddy shoes, and the clothes she had worn. She instructed us to preserve every text and call log. Detective Park arrived 40 minutes later with another officer and a victim services advocate. The detective did not treat Leah like a fragile witness or me like a father entitled to take over. She separated us, recorded our statements, and arranged for Leah to be examined at a hospital under a restricted registration. Blood tests would be less useful after 2 days, but hair and urine samples might still show a sedative. Park also contacted state police about the submerged car. Before leaving, she looked at me. "Mr. Avery, your daughter's safety and the criminal investigation come first. Whatever is happening at the company, do not create a confrontation that warns him." Understood. I meant it. Patience is not the absence of anger. Sometimes it is the decision to make anger wait until the evidence is ready. At the hospital, a CT scan showed a mild concussion. Leah had ligament damage in her wrist, dehydration, and bruising consistent with a fall. The toxicology screen found traces of zolpidem, a drug she had never been prescribed. Detective Park obtained an emergency protective order and began the process of recovering Sophie and Caleb without alerting Grant to Leah's location. While Leah slept, Miriam sat with me in a consultation room and opened her laptop. "I checked the state corporate portal," she said. "Someone filed an amended governance certificate yesterday morning. What does it say?" "That Leah is medically incapacitated and that you resigned as chairman last Friday." "I was at the warehouse last Friday." "I know. The resignation bears your digital signature. The upload originated from the office administrator account. That account belonged to Grant's cousin, Melissa Dane, whom Grant had persuaded Leah to hire 9 months earlier." Miriam continued. There is also a special board meeting scheduled for Monday at 9. The stated purpose is to confirm Grant as interim chair and authorize the Harbor Meridian transaction. They need my shares or Leah's. They believe they have both. Your forged resignation assigns your proxy to Grant for 60 days. Leah's alleged incapacity activates the executor provision. Together with his 10%, he presents himself as controlling 82%. I looked through the narrow window at my daughter asleep under a white blanket. And the insurance? If her body were recovered, he would claim immediately. If it were not, the transaction could still proceed under incapacity documents while he petitioned for presumed death later. So why did he think she died? Because he watched her car enter the lake. He may assume the current hid the body. At 5 that afternoon, Detective Park called. Divers had recovered Leah's Subaru. The passenger seatbelt was fastened around a weighted contractor's bag. A metal bar had been positioned against the accelerator. In the cargo area, investigators found a fuel container, Leah's purse, and a folder holding copies of her insurance policy and medical power of attorney. It was no accident. Park also had Elena's doorbell footage. At 1:47 Tuesday afternoon, Grant carried 2 red fuel cans from his garage to his SUV. At 2:06, Melissa arrived with a document case. At 2:44, she left. On Wednesday at 3:18 in the morning, Grant returned alone and carried a laptop bag and a box from the house. At 2 Thursday morning, shortly before I arrived, he returned again and removed cleaning supplies, a paper shredder, and 2 framed photographs. "Why the photographs?" I asked. Elena enlarged one frame from her video. Grant was holding Margaret and Leah's wedding portrait. The second was a picture of Leah at the company's first warehouse. Leah understood before I did. The signature samples, our old frames, had handwritten notes on the back. Margaret had labeled every family picture. Leah had signed the warehouse photograph for my retirement dinner. Grant was collecting originals that could reveal how signatures had been copied. The detective asked Elena for permission to download the full recordings. Elena gave it without hesitation. That evening, Sophie and Caleb were brought to the hospital through a service entrance. They had been told only that their mother was injured and safe. Sophie took one look at Leah's wrist and said, "Dad told Grandma Mom ran away with someone." Caleb began to cry. He said she didn't want us. Leah pulled them close with her uninjured arm. I turned toward the wall because my face had lost whatever discipline remained. Grant had not merely tried to remove his wife. He had prepared his children to remember her as the person who abandoned them. Later, after the children left with a victim services officer for a protected location, Leah asked me to sit. "Dad, there's more." She told me that Harbor Meridian had paid a $410,000 transaction readiness fee to Blue Lantern Advisory, a company formed by Melissa. Grant had described it as reimbursement for environmental reports. Leah had found the transfer in a draft email and confronted him Monday night. He first claimed I had approved it. When she said she would call me, he took her phone and apologized. The next day, he proposed the drive to the lake. "I should have called you sooner," she said. "You should have been able to trust your husband without dying for the mistake." I trusted the emails because some of them sounded like you. Because he had years of our real arguments. Leah looked at me. "You did say I was risking the company by refusing every buyer." "Yes. You said Margaret would have known when to take a good offer." I closed my eyes. I remembered the argument. 6 months earlier, I had compared my daughter to her dead mother because I wanted to win. Grant had not created that wound. He had used it. "That was cruel," I said. "I was wrong." Leah's expression softened but did not erase what had happened. "Thank you." At midnight, Miriam called with one more discovery. The company's cybersecurity firm had preserved login records showing that the forged emails between Grant and me were created inside a hidden mailbox folder. The account had been accessed from Grant's home network and Melissa's office computer. My real email had never sent them. "We can stop the board meeting immediately," Miriam said. "Would that warn them before police have what they need?" "Yes." I looked at Leah. She was awake, listening. "Let the meeting happen," she said. Miriam hesitated. "Leah, you do not need to expose yourself." "I'm not going into that room. But if Grant believes the plan is working, he'll put the documents and his explanation on the record." Detective Park agreed, with conditions. Leah would remain protected. I would not confront Grant privately. Miriam would attend remotely as counsel. The meeting room would be monitored under legal authority obtained through the investigation. The board members would be informed only when necessary. For the next 2 days, I did nothing publicly. Grant texted me Friday morning. Leah asked for space. "Please respect her mental health journey," An hour later, Monday's meeting is routine. No need for you to attend since your resignation is effective. I replied only once. Received. He interpreted silence as surrender because he had spent years confusing my restraint with weakness. On Saturday, Harbor Meridian's lead negotiator, Curtis Vale, arrived in Richmond. He checked into the Jefferson Hotel and dined with Grant, Melissa, and 2 outside board members. Investigators obtained transaction records showing Blue Lantern had reserved a private villa in Aruba for the following Wednesday. A second payment of $680,000 would be released when the sale documents were signed. The total personal payoff was not $410,000. It was $1.09 million. Sunday afternoon, Detective Park arrested Melissa quietly when she left a grocery store. Faced with charges related to forgery, conspiracy, and attempted murder, she first denied everything. Then investigators showed her the lake evidence, network logs, and Elena's footage. By midnight, she had requested an attorney and indicated she was willing to identify where Grant stored the original documents. We did not know whether she would tell the truth. We no longer needed to depend on it. Monday morning, I dressed in the same charcoal suit I had worn to Margaret's funeral. Not because I wanted to make a statement, but because it was the suit in which I remembered how to stand when my body wanted to collapse. Leah remained in a secure apartment with Sophie and Caleb. Before I left, she handed me her wedding ring in a small envelope. "I don't want you to give it to him," she said. "I just don't want it near me." I put the envelope in Miriam's safe. At 8:52, I entered the boardroom of Avery Cold Storage. Grant was standing at the head of the table beside a screen displaying the Harbor Meridian logo. He wore a navy suit, a silver tie, and the solemn expression of a man preparing to announce a family tragedy that benefited him. He stared at me. "Thomas, you shouldn't be here. I founded the company. You re-signed. Then recording my presence should not concern you." 5 board members sat around the table. Curtis Vale occupied the chair nearest Grant. 2 attorneys I did not recognize had stacks of closing documents in front of them. Miriam sat beside me and placed one thin folder on the table. Grant cleared his throat. "Before we begin, I need to share difficult personal news. Leah has suffered what appears to be a serious mental health crisis. Her vehicle was found in Lake Chesdin. Authorities have not recovered her, and we must prepare for the worst." He lowered his eyes at exactly the right moment. One board member gasped. Another asked whether the children knew. "They are with family," Grant said. "Leah left documents authorizing me to protect her interests." Thomas also recognized the need for continuity and resigned last week. He displayed my resignation on the screen. "Before the board relies on that," Miriam said, "would you identify who witnessed Mr. Avery's signature?" Grant's jaw tightened. Melissa Dane processed it through the administrator portal. "Is MS Dane attending? She had a family emergency. And where did Mr. Avery sign it? His home, I believe." "You believe?" Grant looked at me. "Thomas, this performance is unnecessary." I said nothing. Curtis Vale leaned forward. "We were assured all governance issues were resolved." "They are," Grant said. "Thomas is grieving and confused." Miriam opened her folder. Avery was recorded on the warehouse security system conducting employee meetings at the exact time this document claims he signed at home. His digital certificate was used from the Dane administrator account. The certificate itself was copied from a 2021 equipment lease. Grant's face did not change much. Only the color beneath his eyes faded. "That is a serious allegation," one director said. "It is also incomplete," Miriam replied. "Mr. Grant Mercer, please explain the $410,000 payment from Harbor Meridian to Blue Lantern Advisory." Curtis turned toward Grant. "That payment was disclosed as an environmental and transition expense. Blue Lantern has no employees, no environmental license, and no completed work product," Miriam said. "Its sole manager is Melissa Dane. A further $680,000 payment is contingent upon closing." Grant stood. "This meeting is adjourned." "You called it," I said. "You wanted the record." He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not rage, exactly, but disbelief that I had stepped outside the role he assigned me. "You don't understand what Leah did," he said. "She was destroying the value of this company. She would have left all of you with nothing." The boardroom door opened. Detective Park entered with 2 officers and an investigator from the State Insurance Fraud Unit. Grant glanced toward the second exit. An officer was already standing there. Park said, "Grant Mercer, you are under arrest." He did not ask what charge. That told me more than any denial could have. As the officer secured his hands, Grant looked at me. "Where is she?" I held his gaze. "Alive." For the first time, his composure broke. That's impossible. No one in the room moved. Grant tried to recover. Thomas, listen to me. You have no idea what she promised, what she was going to do. You put her car into a lake. I can explain. Explain it to the people whose job is to listen. They led him out past the photograph of Margaret and me opening our first warehouse. I did not feel triumphant. I felt old, tired, and grateful that my daughter had found one open gate in the dark. The Harbor Meridian deal collapsed before lunch. That was the beginning of the consequences, not the end. By noon, every employee knew the sale had been suspended. By 3, local television trucks were parked outside our main gate. A reporter called my office asking whether the founder's daughter had died in a suspicious accident and whether the company had been laundering money through a consulting firm. I issued one sentence through Miriam. Avery Cold Storage was cooperating with law enforcement. The Harbor Meridian transaction would not proceed, and no further comment would be made while the family's safety was involved. It was not enough to stop speculation, but it was enough to keep me from feeding it. The board placed Grant on immediate suspension and voided every resolution from the special meeting. The Employee Trust's representative, Walter Kim, moved that I resume temporary chairmanship. I declined. Then who runs the company? One director asked. The same operating team that ran it before Grant tried to sell it, I said. Nina Brooks remains chief operating officer. Major transactions require unanimous approval until Leah can participate. You have 41%, another director said. You could take control. That is exactly why I should not. Grant had justified his plan by telling himself only he was competent enough to decide for everyone. I would not answer him by making the same claim with better motives. At 4:30, Detective Park told us Grant had invoked his right to remain silent. A search of his SUV produced disposable gloves, a receipt for the sedative purchased through an online veterinary supplier, and a second phone. The phone contained encrypted messages with Melissa and Curtis Vale. It also contained dozens of photographs of Leah's documents, my signature, and the children's schedules. The search of Leah's house required a warrant, which was why Elena had stopped me at the door. Inside, investigators found Grant's home office stripped of its computer and several file drawers. The paper shredder he had removed was recovered from a commercial dumpster 3 miles away. Technicians reconstructed enough strips to identify insurance forms, a draft obituary for Leah, and a letter supposedly written by her. The letter said she was overwhelmed, ashamed, and leaving her family voluntarily. It included a sentence Leah had written in a private journal 2 years earlier after Margaret's death. Sometimes I want to disappear somewhere. No one needs anything from me. Grant had photographed the journal. When Leah read the reconstructed letter, she did not speak for a long time. He was going to make everyone hate me, she finally said. Not everyone, Sophie said from the other side of the protected apartment. My granddaughter had been listening. She came into the kitchen with her arms crossed in the way Leah did when she was trying not to cry. I wouldn't have believed it, Sophie said. Leah looked at her. He already made you wonder. Sophie's shoulders dropped. For a little while. That isn't your fault. I told Caleb maybe you were tired of us. Leah opened her arms. Sophie stepped into them. I went out onto the small balcony and closed the door behind me. There are moments a parent should witness and moments he should protect by leaving. The criminal case moved more slowly than the public expected and faster than our family could absorb. Grant was charged initially with attempted murder, abduction by deception, insurance fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Additional financial charges would depend on tracing the Harbor Meridian payments. His attorney argued that the car incident had been a marital dispute followed by Leah's panic, that she had taken the sedative voluntarily, and that Grant believed she was suicidal. That explanation failed against the weighted passenger seat, but it did not disappear simply because it was offensive. In court, even a cruel theory must be answered with evidence. At the bond hearing, Grant's lawyer presented him as a devoted father, a respected executive, and a man with no criminal record. He requested release with electronic monitoring so Grant could care for Sophie and Caleb. Leah was not required to attend, but she chose to submit a written statement. Miriam asked whether she wanted me to read it for her. No, Leah said. The prosecutor can read it. This is not Dad versus Grant. The judge denied bond after the prosecutor described the hidden second phone, the planned Aruba trip, and Grant's midnight return to remove evidence. The judge also issued a no-contact order covering Leah, the children, Elena, me, and company employees involved in the case. Outside the courthouse, Grant's mother, Diane, approached me. She was 70, elegantly dressed, with the rigid posture of someone holding herself together through anger. "You turned my son into a monster on television," she said. "I have not spoken to television. Leah has always resented him. You encouraged it." I could have told her about the lake, the drug, and the obituary. Instead, I said, "Diane, Sophie, and Caleb love you. Please do not make them choose between loving their grandmother and believing what happened to their mother." Her eyes filled, but her voice remained hard. "Grant says it was an accident. Then let the evidence test his explanation. And if he is innocent, then the evidence should matter to you too." She walked away without answering. 3 days later, Diane gave Detective Park a tablet Grant had left at her house. She did not apologize. She simply said she had found it in the guest room closet and did not want the children blamed for hiding it. The tablet changed the financial case. It contained a spreadsheet titled Transition Outcomes. The first tab listed the $13.6 million purchase price. The second allocated $1.09 million to Blue Lantern, $2.4 million in anticipated insurance proceeds, and $870,000 to pay off Grant's personal investment losses. A third tab projected the value of my remaining shares after the riverfront property was sold and 2 facilities were closed. Beside my name, Grant had written, "Likely to settle if grandchildren protected." He had calculated my love for Sophie and Caleb as leverage. The same device contained draft messages intended for me after Leah's presumed death. One began, "Thomas, we both failed her in different ways. For the children, we must avoid a public fight." I read that line twice and closed the file. "You don't have to keep reading," Miriam said. "Yes, I do." The next draft offered me an honorary advisory role if I signed the sale documents. Another warned that a custody dispute would traumatize the children. Grant intended to ask me to exchange silence for access to my grandchildren. What frightened me most was not that the plan was clever. It was that part of it might have worked. If Leah had died and Grant had stood before me grieving, I might have accepted his version because the alternative would have been unbearable. I might have signed something to keep Sophie and Caleb near me. He knew me well enough to design the cage. That realization changed the way I thought about evidence. Documents did more than punish lies afterward. They protected people at the moment grief made judgment unreliable. Leah and the children moved to a furnished rental owned by one of Miriam's clients. The location stayed confidential. I visited in daylight and only after asking. That last part mattered. For most of Leah's childhood, I had been the father who fixed things before she could name the problem. A flat tire, a bad landlord, a college bill, a difficult supervisor. I arrived with money, tools, or advice. After Margaret died, that habit became stronger. I told myself I was protecting our daughter. Leah experienced it as a vote of no confidence. Grant had exploited that too. He told her every disagreement with me proved I would never respect her authority. Then he told me every boundary she set was evidence he needed to protect her from stress. He became the translator between us and gradually changed the language. One evening, Leah and I sat at the rental's kitchen table while the children did homework upstairs. "I want to return to work next week," she said. My first response rose automatically. "Too soon. You need rest. Let me handle it." I did not say any of those things. "What would make returning safe?" I asked. She studied me, noticing the effort. "Remote meetings first. Nina sends me daily reports. No press. And I want Grant's office sealed until my lawyer and the investigators finish. That can be done. I also want an independent governance review, including my decisions, especially yours." I nodded. "Good," she leaned back. "You really mean that?" If our controls allowed one administrator account to submit my resignation and no one called me, the problem is larger than Grant. He told everyone you preferred informal approvals. I did, for years. It was efficient when I knew every employee and signed every check. It became dangerous when the company grew. That was another truth I could not assign to Grant. I had built a business around trust and then acted offended when people used trust as a substitute for verification. The independent review began under a former federal bank examiner named Paula Green. She interviewed employees from the loading dock to the board. She found that Grant had centralized vendor approvals, insurance renewals, and executive communications in his office. He had removed a requirement for 2 signatures on consulting payments below $500,000, calling it modernization. I had voted for that change because the old process seemed slow. He had also persuaded the board to classify Blue Lantern as a pre-approved transaction vendor. Melissa uploaded 3 invoices: environmental due diligence, workforce transition modeling, and client retention analysis. None had supporting reports. The payments passed because each person reviewing them assumed someone else had seen the work. Paula's preliminary report used a sentence I repeated at the next board meeting. Trust is a relationship. Control is a process. One cannot replace the other. We froze all non-essential consulting payments, restored dual authorization, required direct verification of executive signatures, and established a confidential employee reporting line outside management. These were not dramatic reforms. That was why they mattered. Real protection often looks boring until the day someone needs it. The employee trust demanded a permanent board seat with audit authority. Leah supported the demand. 2 directors resisted, arguing employees lacked transaction expertise. Walter Kim, who had supervised our night shift for 21 years, answered them. "We knew the riverfront site was being measured on Sundays," he said. "We knew outside men were photographing the loading lanes. We reported it to Grant's office, and his office told us it was an insurance inspection. Maybe expertise includes listening to the people who can see the building." The motion passed. Meanwhile, Harbor Meridian tried to distance itself from Curtis Vale. Its general counsel sent a letter claiming Vale had exceeded his authority and that the company knew nothing about Blue Lantern's beneficial arrangement. The letter offered to waive all claims related to the failed purchase if Avery Cold Storage agreed not to make public accusations. Miriam read it aloud in my office. "They want peace," I said. "They want containment," she replied. "What do we want?" Leah joined by video. The bruise at her temple had faded to yellow. The $410,000 back. Full preservation of Vale's messages, reimbursement for the forensic audit, and no confidentiality clause preventing cooperation with regulators. Harbor Meridian rejected the demand. 2 days later, state investigators froze Blue Lantern's account. Of the $410,000, only $263,000 remained. The rest had paid Grant's credit cards, a deposit on the Aruba villa, Melissa's car loan, and a $38,000 transfer to a notary named Owen Bell. Bell had notarized Leah's estate documents. Detective Park interviewed him. He initially claimed Leah had appeared alert and signed voluntarily. Then investigators showed him a home camera recording recovered from cloud storage. The video showed Bell arriving at 10:18 one night, Grant meeting him in the driveway, and both men entering through the garage. Leah appeared briefly in the kitchen, unsteady and wearing a robe. Bell remained 11 minutes. The documents recorded a 45-minute identity verification and private consultation. Faced with the video and payment, Bell admitted Grant had provided the documents in advance and assured him Leah was taking prescribed medication. Bell claimed he did not know about the murder plan. He surrendered his commission and agreed to cooperate. His testimony established that Grant had prepared the incapacity and executor documents 6 weeks before the lake. The defense called it estate planning. The prosecutor called it preparation. Both descriptions would eventually be tested before a jury. For Leah, the legal language mattered less than sleeping. She woke at 2:17 almost every morning, the approximate time she believed the Subaru entered the water. She could not drink coffee from a travel mug. The sound of automatic door locks made her hands numb. Once, when Caleb dropped a metal water bottle on the kitchen floor, Leah slid beneath the table before she realized where she was. She began seeing a trauma therapist twice a week. The children saw a separate counselor. I offered to drive them, and Leah said no. The refusal pricked me more than it should have. "The advocate takes us," she explained. "I need one part of this that isn't managed by family." All right. I went home and sat in Margaret's chair, irritated at myself for feeling excluded from appointments I had no right to attend. Love can disguise a desire for access. I was learning to tell the difference. Elena became the one person Leah could ask for help without feeling that a debt followed. She brought soup, sat through quiet afternoons, and never asked Leah to describe the lake. When reporters began parking near Juniper Lane, Elena organized the neighbors. No one gave interviews. Packages were collected. Strange cars were photographed. Someone watered Leah's hydrangeas. I asked Elena why she had taken such a risk. We were standing at the gate between the 2 yards, now wrapped in yellow police tape. "Because she knocked," Elena said. "That cannot be the whole reason. It is enough." Then she told me about her younger sister, Rosa, who had lived with an abusive husband in Texas for 14 years. Rosa once called Elena and asked whether she could stay for a week. Elena had been caring for her own husband after surgery and suggested Rosa wait until the following month. Rosa never called again. She died 6 weeks later in what police classified as a single-car accident. I don't know whether her husband caused it, Elena said. I know I asked her to wait. The yellow tape lifted in the wind between us. Leah did not survive because you failed Rosa, I said. No, Elena looked at her house. But when someone knocked this time, I opened the door. We stood without speaking. There was nothing useful to add. The children returned to school under a security plan. Sophie wanted everyone told the truth. Caleb wanted no one to know anything. Leah and the counselor helped them agree on one sentence. Their mother had survived a serious crime. Their father was in custody, and the family would not discuss details. On Sophie's first day back, another student showed her a headline calling Grant an executive husband accused in Lake plot. Sophie shoved the phone away and spent lunch in the counselor's office. That evening, she asked Leah whether she could change her last name. Leah did not answer immediately. You can someday, she said, but you don't have to decide who you are while everyone else is shouting about him. Sophie chose to wait. Caleb stopped drawing cars. He began drawing warehouses instead. Long buildings with bright lights and tiny people standing at every door. When I asked about them, he said, nobody gets trapped because there are lots of exits. I kept that drawing in my desk. 6 weeks after the arrest, prosecutors offered Melissa a cooperation agreement. In exchange for truthful testimony and restitution, they would recommend a reduced sentence on the financial charges, though she still faced prison. Leah asked to read the agreement. Do you want to oppose it? Miriam asked. I want to know what truth they're buying. Melissa's recorded proffer lasted 7 hours. She described Grant's plan from its financial beginning. He had lost nearly $900,000 trading leveraged technology stocks and concealed the losses through credit cards and home equity draws. When Harbor Meridian approached him, he saw a way to cover the debt. Leah refused to sell. I supported her position publicly, but our private conflict gave Grant the material to isolate her. At first, Melissa believed they were only manipulating a board vote. She created the false emails, incorporated Blue Lantern, and arranged the notary. She knew Grant was increasing Leah's life insurance, but claimed he described it as leverage with lenders. 2 weeks before the lake, Grant asked her how long a missing shareholder could be treated as incapacitated. She understood then that he intended physical harm. Why didn't you stop? The investigator asked. On the recording, Melissa cried. Because I had already taken the money. It was not an excuse. It was the most believable thing she said. Grant had structured complicity in stages. Each dishonest act made the next refusal more expensive. By the time Melissa recognized the whole plan, admitting the truth meant confessing her own crimes. He counted on shame to keep her moving forward. Her evidence included audio from a meeting at Grant's house. In it, Curtis Vale said, I don't care how you secure the votes. I need clean authority on Monday. Grant answered, You'll have it. Leah will not be an issue. Vale insisted he thought Grant meant a marital settlement. A grand jury later indicted him for commercial bribery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction related to deleted messages. He was not charged in the attempted murder because the evidence did not show he knew about the lake. Harbor Meridian's board then changed its posture. The company returned the full $410,000, reimbursed $186,000 in audit and legal costs, and agreed to cooperate without a confidentiality restriction. It terminated Vale and commissioned its own review. Some directors at Avery wanted us to sue for tens of millions in reputational damages. Leah declined to authorize an immediate lawsuit. We preserve the claim, she said. We do not spend 3 years proving we were harmed while neglecting the company that needs repair. I agreed, though an older version of me would have wanted the public victory. That winter, Leah filed for divorce. Grant contested everything: the house, custody, the validity of the protective order, and the classification of his shares. He argued that his 10% company interest was marital property acquired through legitimate transfer. Leah had indeed transferred the shares voluntarily 7 years earlier. Attempted murder did not automatically rewrite history. The issue was difficult because justice is not the same as pretending every prior choice never occurred. Miriam recommended invoking the shareholder agreement's felony misconduct clause, which allowed the company to repurchase shares from an owner who committed fraud against the business. Grant had not yet been convicted. Could we suspend the voting rights? I asked. Only under the emergency provision, and it must be reviewed every 90 days. Then we review it. We placed the economic value of his shares in escrow rather than confiscating it. If convicted, the company could apply part of the value to restitution. If acquitted, his ownership rights would be restored subject to the divorce court. Several employees were angry. He tried to sell our jobs, one driver said at a town hall meeting. Why protect his money? Leah stood at the front of the warehouse cafeteria. Because rules that protect only people we like are not controls, she said. They are weapons. We are rebuilding a company that cannot be taken over by one frightened family, including mine. The room remained tense, but no one could accuse her of using the company as revenge. After the meeting, I told her Margaret would have been proud. Leah looked at me. I know you mean that kindly, I heard the warning. I am proud, I corrected. Not because you resemble your mother, because that was your decision, she smiled. Thank you, Dad. It was a small exchange. It repaired something large. Christmas arrived without Grant. Diane asked to see the children. Leah agreed to 2 supervised visits at a family center. The first lasted 23 minutes. Diane brought expensive gifts and spent the entire time insisting Grant loved them. Sophie asked, "Does loving us mean he didn't hurt Mom?" Diane began to cry and said she could not discuss an active case. Sophie left the room. The supervisor ended the visit. Before the second visit, Leah wrote Diane a boundary. She could love her son, challenge the accusations through lawful channels, and maintain a relationship with the grandchildren. She could not ask the children to deny their mother's experience or carry messages from Grant. Diane canceled. On Christmas Eve, a parcel arrived for Caleb from an unknown sender. Inside was a model of Grant's black SUV and a card reading "Dad will come home when the truth wins." We gave both to Detective Park. Shipping records traced the parcel to Diane's assistant. The court suspended her visits. Leah did not celebrate. She sat by the tree after the children went to bed and stared at the unopened gifts Diane had sent earlier. They lost a grandmother too, she said. Diane made a choice. That doesn't make the loss smaller. I sat beside her. No, we let the truth remain painful without trying to improve it. In January, the Riverfront warehouse lost its largest pharmaceutical client. The client cited instability and moved its contract to a national distributor. Revenue projections fell 12%. Some directors renewed the argument for a sale, this time to a different buyer. Grant's crime does not make every acquisition wrong, one director said. He was correct. Refusing all buyers merely to prove Grant had failed would have been another form of letting him control us. Leah commissioned an independent valuation and asked employees for alternatives. Walter Kim proposed converting unused freezer space into smaller temperature-controlled units for regional clinics and specialty food producers. Nina Brooks had been developing a similar plan but could not obtain funding while Grant controlled capital approvals. The conversion required $3.2 million. We could borrow it, accept a minority investment, or sell a non-core parcel near the old rail spur. I favored selling the parcel. Leah favored a minority investor with logistics expertise. Our first meeting became heated. "You're inviting another company into governance before we have repaired it," I said. "And you're selling the only land that gives us room to expand," she answered. "Expansion is theoretical. Debt is real. So is strategic isolation." The room grew quiet. 6 months earlier, one of us would have walked out and allowed Grant to summarize the argument later. This time, Leah closed her notebook. "Let's state what evidence would change our minds," she said. I wanted to continue defending my position. Instead, I wrote down 3 conditions. A minority investor could receive no more than 12%, no unilateral sale rights, and no control over employment decisions for 5 years. Leah listed her own conditions for a land sale: an independent appraisal, preservation of expansion access, and employee trust approval. We asked Paula Green to compare both plans. The final solution combined them. We sold a narrow frontage parcel that did not block expansion for $1.1 million, borrowed $1.4 million, and accepted a $900,000 minority investment from a regional hospital cooperative. The cooperative received 7% non-voting equity and guaranteed 5 years of medical storage contracts. No one won the argument. The company did. Construction began in March. Grant's criminal trial was scheduled for May, then delayed until September after his lawyers challenged the search of the tablet and the admissibility of Elena's camera footage. Each delay reopened the family's anxiety. Leah would receive a notice, sleep badly for a week, then reconstruct her routine. I began attending a support group for families of violent crime survivors. At the first meeting, I nearly left because everyone spoke about feelings in a church basement under fluorescent lights. I preferred invoices, court dates, and action lists. But an older man named Samuel described spending 4 years trying to become indispensable to his adult son after an assault. "I called it helping," Samuel said. "He called it another person watching him." I stayed. The group taught me that secondary trauma could turn protection into surveillance. I had begun checking the rental security feed too often. I texted Leah whenever she drove at night. I knew Grant's danger was real, but I also knew my monitoring made my fear her daily burden. I removed my access to the cameras. When I told Leah, she said, "I wondered how long it would take." "You knew?" "Dad, you texted me 30 seconds after a delivery man stood on the porch." I thought I was subtle. "You have never been subtle," we laughed. It was the first time laughter did not feel disloyal to what had happened. In April, Leah returned to Juniper Lane with a locksmith, an investigator, and Elena. The police had released the house months earlier, but she had not been able to enter. Grant's clothes remained in the closet. 2 mugs sat in the dishwasher. A grocery list in his handwriting was attached to the refrigerator, as if the week had only paused. I waited across the street because Leah asked me not to come. After 40 minutes, she emerged carrying 1 cardboard box. She crossed to Elena's house and set it on the dining table. Inside were the children's baby books, Margaret's recipes, the first warehouse photograph, and Leah's journal. "That's all I want today," she said. She did not ask what to do with the house. She was allowed to decide later. Elena made tea. Leah opened the journal to the page Grant had used in the false farewell letter. Below the sentence about disappearing, she had written another line he omitted. "Then Sophie knocks on my door, or Caleb asks a question, and I remember being needed is not the same as being trapped." Grant had selected the sentence that served him and erased the one that did not. Leah photographed the complete page for the prosecutor. "I want the jury to see both," she said. That became the central principle of the trial months later, context restored. Before the trial, there was the insurance fight. The $2.4 million policy had not paid because Leah was alive, but the carrier had spent money investigating Grant's initial notice of loss. Its fraud unit discovered that the application for increased coverage described Leah as the sole executive responsible for 3 secured loans. That was false. Nina and I were also guarantors, and the company had enough insurance to satisfy the bank. More troubling was the signature of our insurance broker, Stephen Moss. Stephen had worked with our family for 12 years. He claimed Grant sent him the financial information and Leah signed electronically during a video call. The insurer's metadata showed no video session. The signature request had been routed to an address differing from Leah's real address by 1 letter. When Miriam and I met Stephen, he looked 10 years older than he had at our renewal lunch the previous spring. Grant said Leah wanted privacy because of health concerns, he told us. He said she was embarrassed about anxiety treatment. "Did you call her?" I asked. "I emailed. The wrong address." The address Grant provided. "Did you call the number you had used for 12 years? Stephen looked at the table. No, he had not taken a bribe. He had taken a shortcut. The difference mattered criminally, but it would not have mattered if Leah had died. The State Insurance Commission suspended his license for 6 months and required supervision when it was restored. His agency's professional liability carrier paid the costs of unwinding the policy and contributed to Leah's legal fees. Stephen wrote Leah an apology that contained no request for forgiveness. She kept the letter but did not answer. "Do you think he deserves another chance?" I asked. "At his career?" she said. "That is for his regulator and employer. At a relationship with me? I don't know yet." I began to understand that forgiveness was not one door. It was a building with many rooms, and no one was entitled to every key. The divorce court granted Leah temporary sole legal and physical custody. Grant's attorney requested supervised video calls with the children. Sophie refused. Caleb said he wanted to see his father but not speak. The court-appointed child specialist met with each child and recommended no contact until the criminal case progressed. Grant sent letters through his attorney anyway. The first told Sophie he forgave her for believing adult stories. The second told Caleb that strong men protected family even when misunderstood. The judge ordered the letters held rather than delivered. Grant then accused Leah of parental alienation. His filing quoted messages in which she had once complained to me that he traveled too much and missed Caleb's school concert. The filing omitted her next messages, where she defended Grant's work obligations and asked me not to criticize him around the children. Again, selected truth. Miriam responded with the full thread. At a hearing in June, the judge warned Grant's counsel that any further selective presentation could lead to sanctions. Grant's attorney withdrew from the family case 2 weeks later, citing irreconcilable differences about strategy. The company recovered $263,000 from Blue Lantern's frozen account. Melissa's car was sold, and the Aruba deposit was refunded after litigation. Combined with Harbor Meridian's repayment, nearly all transaction funds returned, though legal and forensic costs exceeded $300,000. Grant's personal assets were heavily encumbered. His 10% share interest remained the only significant source for future restitution. Some people asked whether Leah would receive the $2.4 million insurance money anyway, as though surviving an attempted killing ought to generate a prize. Policies do not work that way. The coverage was rescinded. Premiums were returned to the company. Leah received nothing from it, which was exactly right. Justice did not make her rich. It made a fraudulent claim impossible. In July, the new medical storage units opened. We held no ribbon-cutting ceremony. The first shipment was insulin for rural clinics during a heat emergency. Walter Kim stood beside the temperature monitors at 3 in the morning and sent Leah a photograph of the reading holding steady. She forwarded it to me with one line: "This is why we stayed." The hospital cooperative contract allowed us to rehire 12 employees whose hours had been cut. Revenue had not fully recovered, but the company was stable. At the annual shareholder meeting, Leah proposed separating the chair and chief executive roles permanently. She would remain chief executive. The independent chair would be Paula Green for an initial 2-year term. I would retain my shares and one board seat, but surrender special founder vetoes created decades earlier. The room reacted with surprise. "Those vetoes protected the company from Grant," one shareholder said. "One of them did," Leah replied. "Others allowed Dad and me to make exceptions without review. We cannot redesign governance around the hope that the most powerful person is always the good one." All eyes turned to me. "I support the proposal," I said. Giving up authority felt different from having it stolen. One was not loss. It was completion. The measure passed with 89% support. Grant's suspended shares were not counted. Afterward, Walter found me near the loading dock. "You all right, Muster? Avery?" "I'm unemployed again," he smiled. "You own 41%. Unemployed with dividends. Could be worse." I looked at the trucks backing into the bays, guided by employees who no longer needed me to tell them where to stand. It could. In August, prosecutors offered Grant a plea agreement, 28 years with the possibility of supervised release after serving 85%, in exchange for guilty pleas to attempted murder, aggravated malicious wounding, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. Additional forgery charges would merge for sentencing. The agreement required a complete factual statement and waiver of claims to company control, though his economic share value would remain subject to restitution and family court orders. Grant rejected it. His lawyer announced that Leah had staged the lake incident to remove him from the company and gain sympathy in the divorce. According to the new theory, she had taken zolpidem willingly, escaped the car before it entered the water, and hidden at Elena's house while planting evidence. When the statement appeared online, strangers began dissecting Leah's behavior. Why had she refused the first emergency room? Why had she waited to call her father? Why had she gone to a neighbor instead of police? Why was there no video of Grant pushing the car? Each question treated survival under terror as if it should follow an approved checklist. Leah stopped reading comments. I did not. For 3 nights, I sat at my computer saving screenshots and drafting answers no one had asked me to give. On the 4th morning, Miriam found me in my office. "You cannot cross-examine the internet," she said. "They are calling her a liar. And your replies will become discovery, headlines, and perhaps evidence. More importantly, they will teach Leah that her father cannot tolerate anyone doubting her unless he personally corrects them. What is wrong with correcting them? You will fail. There will always be another stranger." I hated her answer because it was true. I deleted the drafts and gave Miriam the screenshots containing threats. The rest I closed. Leah prepared for trial with the prosecutor. She visited the boat ramp once during daylight. Detective Park walked her through the route from the car to the drainage ditch. Leah's therapist attended. I waited at a diner 2 miles away. When she returned, her jeans were muddy at the knees. "Do you want to talk?" I asked. "No. Do you want company?" she thought. "Yes. We ate pie without talking." The trial began 14 months after Elena stopped me at the door. Jury selection took 4 days. Prospective jurors were questioned about domestic violence, financial crime, and whether delayed reporting suggested dishonesty. One man said a real victim would call 911 immediately. Another said wealthy families invented crimes during business disputes. Both were excused. The final jury included a nurse, a mechanic, a retired accountant, a restaurant manager, 2 teachers, a truck driver, a software engineer, a postal worker, a home health aide, a graduate student, and a small business owner. None looked like the people Grant had imagined when he built his plan. That comforted me. The prosecutor's opening was restrained. She did not call Grant evil. She described a sequence: debt, a blocked sale, forged authority, increased insurance, sedation, the lake, and a plan to close before anyone could question Leah's absence. Grant's lawyer told the jury the state had mistaken a collapsing marriage for attempted murder. He said Grant panicked after Leah drove toward the water during an argument, then made terrible financial decisions because he believed she was dead. He promised evidence of Leah's anxiety and conflict with me. The state called the landscaping worker who found Leah. He testified that she was soaked, disoriented, and hiding from every passing black vehicle. The urgent care nurse testified that Leah asked repeatedly whether the clinic could keep her name out of electronic records. The toxicologist explained the zolpidem level and why traces remained 2 days later. Divers showed photographs of the weighted passenger seat and accelerator bar. A reconstruction expert demonstrated that the Subaru entered the lake without a driver controlling the steering after the barrier. Grant's lawyer suggested Leah could have arranged it herself. Then Elena testified. She wore a plain gray suit and answered every question carefully. She described Leah arriving barefoot at 5:26 Wednesday morning, wet to the waist and unable to hold a cup with her right hand. She described calling Detective Park and preserving the clothes. The prosecutor played the doorbell videos of Grant carrying fuel cans, Melissa delivering the document case, and Grant removing the shredder. On cross-examination, the defense asked whether Elena disliked Grant. "I barely knew him," she said. "But you were close to Leah. We exchanged vegetables and collected each other's packages. You let her hide in your home. I let an injured neighbor enter my home, and you immediately assumed her husband tried to kill her?" Elena looked at the attorney. "No, I believe she was afraid. The police investigated why." "You told Thomas Avery not to enter the house because you wanted to control the evidence, correct?" "I told him not to enter because Detective Park told me no one should disturb the house and because his daughter was across the street waiting for him." Her calm made the defense's insinuations look smaller than they sounded. Melissa testified under her cooperation agreement for 2.5 days. The prosecutor did not hide her crimes. She walked Melissa through every forged email, invoice, and payment. Melissa admitted she expected money and a senior position after the sale. She admitted she understood physical harm was possible before Tuesday and did nothing. The defense attacked her as a liar trading testimony for leniency. "Yes," Melissa said, "I lied for money. I am telling the truth now because the files prove it and because Leah lived, because you want less prison." That too. Her honesty about self-interest made her harder to dismiss. Owen Bell, the notary, testified about Leah's condition when he witnessed the estate documents. Stephen Moss testified about the insurance application and his failure to verify Leah directly. Paula Green explained the corporate filings without burying the jury in terminology. Walter Kim described reporting the Sunday measurements and being ignored. Then I took the stand. The prosecutor asked about the company, our ownership, and the false resignation. She displayed the real 2021 equipment lease beside the forged document. My signature matched perfectly because it was the same digital image, down to a tiny gap where the pen had skipped. She asked about my relationship with Leah. "We loved each other," I said. "We also argued about the future of the company. Did you compare her unfavorably to her late mother?" "I did." "Did you tell her she was risking the company by refusing buyers?" "Yes." "Did you secretly agree with Grant to remove her?" "No." "Did you re-sign his chair?" "No." "Did you authorize the sale to Harbor Meridian?" "No." On cross-examination, Grant's attorney approached with printed emails. "Meh, Avery, you wrote that Leah was too emotionally attached to the employees to make rational financial decisions, didn't you?" "I did not write that." "The message bears your name." "The message was created by Grant and Melissa." "You expect the jury to believe every damaging message is forged?" "No. The jury should believe the server records identifying which messages are forged. I have also admitted the cruel things I actually said." He paused. "You benefit financially from Grant's conviction, correct?" "No. His shares may be repurchased at independently appraised value, placed toward restitution and family orders. I do not receive them. You regained power after his arrest. I declined the chairmanship and later surrendered my founder vetoes. But your daughter became chief executive without opposition. She was chief executive before the crime." The attorney returned to counsel table. Before I stepped down, the prosecutor asked one final question. "Why did you go to Leah's house that Thursday?" "Because she had not answered me for 4 days, and the explanation did not sound like her." "What stopped you from entering?" I looked toward Elena, a neighbor who knew opening a door at the wrong time could destroy evidence, and who knew my daughter needed me across the street more than I needed answers inside the house, Leah testified next. I had thought watching her describe the lake would be the hardest part. It was not. The hardest part was listening to her describe the months before it. Grant reading her messages, changing passwords, interpreting conversations with me, bringing medication when she had headaches, telling her the board questioned her stability, and persuading her that every person around her had privately lost confidence. Abuse had not begun at the boat ramp. It had begun with control presented as assistance. The prosecutor handed Leah the journal page. "Did you write the sentence used in the farewell letter?" "Yes." "Please read the complete passage." Leah read both sentences. The wish to disappear and the reminder that being needed was not the same as being trapped. "Did you write the farewell letter?" "No." "Did you voluntarily enter the lake?" "No." "What did you hear after you escaped the car?" "Grant on the phone," he said. "It's done." We have until Monday, on cross-examination. Grant's attorney asked why she did not call police from the landscaping worker's phone. "I thought Grant had told people I was unstable," she said. "I had been drugged. I was confused. But you were clear enough to choose a clinic outside Richmond. I asked to go somewhere he would not look, and clear enough to hide at Mrs. Ortiz's house. I was clear about being afraid of my husband. You had opposed the sale and knew Grant would control your shares if you disappeared, correct? I learned the details after I survived. Isn't it true you and your father designed this accusation to remove Grant from the company?" Leah looked at me, then back at the attorney. "My father did not know I was alive until Mrs. Ortiz stopped him at my door. The defense called a psychiatrist who had never examined Leah. He testified that zolpidem could cause confusion, unusual behavior, and memory gaps. On cross-examination, he agreed it did not construct weighted bags, buy fuel, forge signatures, or schedule corporate closings. Grant chose to testify. His lawyer advised against it, we later learned, but Grant believed he could restore the version of himself everyone once trusted. He spoke gently. He described loving Leah, worrying about her stress, and trying to save the company. He admitted creating Blue Lantern to receive a transaction fee, but said it was standard advisory compensation. He admitted false emails, but claimed they were intended to force Thomas and Leah into negotiations. He admitted driving to the lake. He denied drugging Leah. According to Grant, they argued at the boat ramp. Leah got behind the wheel and threatened to drive into the water. He stepped out to call for help. The car rolled forward. He panicked, assumed she was inside, and left because he feared blame. "Why did you not call emergency services?" his lawyer asked. "Cowardice," Grant said, allowing his voice to break. "I will regret it every day." "Why did you proceed with the sale?" "Because I believed it was the only way to protect the employees and children from financial collapse." For a few minutes, I could see the man Leah had married, intelligent, regretful, persuasive. Then the prosecutor stood. She asked why the passenger seat belt was fastened around a contractor's bag. "I don't know." "Why the accelerator was held by a metal bar bearing his fingerprints." "That bar was kept in the garage. Leah could have taken it." "Why he purchased fuel cans that afternoon." "For the cabin generator." "Why the generator tank was already full." "I didn't know it was." "Why he removed a shredder and signature photographs at 2 in the morning." "I was grieving and not thinking clearly." "Why he drafted an obituary before the lake." "Melissa drafted it as part of estate contingency planning." "Why his spreadsheet listed insurance proceeds and Aruba reservations, financial projections, and a family trip." "Why he told Melissa in a recovered message, make sure the passenger weight stays belted or the car may stop too soon." Grant stopped answering. His attorney objected, arguing the message lacked context. The judge overruled. The prosecutor placed the complete conversation on the screen. Melissa had asked whether a contractor's bag would shift. Grant sent the instruction about the seatbelt. 2 messages later, he wrote, "Water handles the rest." There was no context that improved it. Closing arguments ended on a Thursday. The jury deliberated for 11 hours over 2 days. During the wait, Leah sat in a private room with her advocate. I walked the same courthouse corridor until Miriam told me I was wearing a path in the carpet. At 4:17 Friday afternoon, the jury returned. Guilty of attempted murder, guilty of aggravated malicious wounding, guilty of insurance fraud, guilty of conspiracy and multiple counts of forgery. Grant showed no reaction until the clerk polled the jury. When the retired accountant answered yes, Grant turned toward Leah. She did not look back. Outside, reporters shouted questions. We left through a secured hallway. There was no speech, no raised fist, no celebration. In the car, Leah exhaled and said, "I thought I would feel different." "How do you feel?" "Like he was found guilty. That's all. That was enough for one day. Sentencing was set for 7 weeks later. Before then, the court ordered a presentence report and allowed statements from the victims. The prosecutor asked whether I wanted to speak. "Leah is the victim," I said. "You were a target of the fraud, and the plan affected your family and company." I agreed to write something, then spent 4 days producing language that sounded like a closing argument. Miriam read the draft and placed it back on my desk. "This explains Grant," she said. "It does not explain the harm to you. The harm to me is secondary." "Secondary is not imaginary," I began again. I wrote about standing at Leah's door, believing I might find her body. I wrote about Sophie wondering whether her mother had abandoned her and Caleb drawing buildings with many exits. I wrote about reading Grant's plan to use access to the children as leverage. I wrote that I no longer trusted my first reaction when a loved one stopped answering, because some part of me would always hear water. I did not ask for the maximum sentence. I asked the judge to impose one that recognized preparation, not merely panic, the use of children, not merely money, and the many opportunities Grant had to stop. Leah's statement was shorter. "You did not take one moment from me," she wrote to Grant. "You arranged months of my life so that I would doubt my father, my colleagues, my memory, and finally my right to survive. I do not ask the court to make me whole. That is work I will do with people I choose. I ask the court to protect us while I do it." At sentencing, Grant spoke for 26 minutes. He apologized to the children, his mother, employees, and everyone who misunderstood his desperate decisions. He did not apologize directly to Leah. He maintained that he never intended her death, despite the verdict, and blamed Melissa for escalating the financial fraud. The judge listened without interruption. Then she imposed 36 years for the violent offenses and a consecutive 6 years for fraud and conspiracy, with portions suspended after 31 years served, followed by supervised release. She ordered restitution from Grant's share interest and prohibited contact with Leah, the children, Elena, and me unless a future court found it safe and the protected person requested it. Grant would be in his 70s before any realistic release. Diane sat behind him. When the sentence was announced, she made a sound like air leaving a damaged instrument. Leah closed her eyes. Sophie and Caleb were not present. Afterward, Diane approached Leah in the courthouse corridor. An officer stepped between them, but Leah raised a hand. "You may speak from there," she said. Diane's face seemed to have aged years since the bond hearing. "He is still your children's father." "Yes, 31 years is his life. He tried to end mine." Diane looked at me, perhaps expecting intervention. I did not give it. "I returned the tablet," she said. "You did the right thing," Leah replied. "Doesn't that matter?" "It mattered to the truth. It does not purchase access to the children." Diane began crying. "What do I have to do?" Leah's voice remained gentle. "Stop asking them to carry your belief that their father is innocent. Work with the family therapist. Follow the court order. Let them decide the pace. And if I can't say he is guilty, you can say the jury found him guilty and that you love them. You can say you are not asking them to resolve your grief." Diane left without agreeing. 3 months later, she contacted the therapist. Her first 2 sessions ended early. In the third, she acknowledged that Grant had lied about the tablet. By the 6th, she agreed not to discuss the criminal case with the children. Supervised visits resumed for 1 hour each month. Repair was not reconciliation. It was measured behavior repeated long enough to become credible. Melissa pleaded guilty to conspiracy, forgery, commercial bribery, and accessory charges. The judge sentenced her to 9 years, with 3 suspended, followed by restitution and probation. Some people considered the sentence too light because her testimony helped convict Grant. Others considered it too harsh because she had not gone to the lake. Leah attended the sentencing but did not speak. Outside, a reporter asked whether she forgave Melissa. "Her cooperation mattered," Leah said. "Her choices also mattered." The court addressed both. It was the only public statement she made about the case. Curtis Vale accepted a plea on commercial bribery and obstruction. He served 18 months in federal custody and lost his securities licenses. Harbor Meridian paid a civil penalty and entered a compliance agreement. Owen Bell received probation after his cooperation, lost his notary commission permanently, and pleaded guilty to false acknowledgement. Stephen Moss was not charged. His administrative penalties remained. No single courtroom handled the whole truth. It was distributed across criminal court, family court, regulators, corporate records, and the private boundaries Leah set. That frustrated people who wanted one final scene in which every debt was paid at once. Life is rarely organized for an audience. The divorce became final 2 years and 3 months after the lake. Grant's 10% company interest was valued at $1.48 million after discounts and liabilities. Under the misconduct clause and settlement approved by both courts, Avery Cold Storage repurchased it. The proceeds went first to restitution, legal obligations, and the children's secured trusts. Grant received no cash. Leah retained the house, though she sold it 6 months later. She did not want to live at Juniper Lane, but she also refused to let Grant's last night determine the sale. She repaired the porch, replaced the garage door, repainted the bedroom, and planted a new hydrangea beside the gate. Then she listed the property with full disclosure of the widely reported crime. A young couple bought it. The wife was an emergency room nurse. The husband taught music. They had a toddler who waved at Elena during the inspection. On closing day, Leah walked through each room alone. Elena waited in her kitchen across the street. I waited at my own house. At noon, Leah called. "It's done," she said. The phrase had once meant a car entering water. Now it meant a deed recorded in her name and released by her choice. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Hungry." We met for sandwiches. Leah used part of the home equity to buy a smaller house 12 minutes from the children's school. It had no lake nearby. For the first year, she slept in a room facing the street so she could see arriving cars. Later, she moved to the back bedroom because morning sunlight reached it first. Sophie kept the Mercer surname through high school. On her 18th birthday, she petitioned to add Avery as a second surname rather than erase the first. "I don't want his name to own what it means," she told us. She became Sophie Mercer Avery. Caleb never changed his name. He said a name was just where records found you. Instead, he asked whether he could work at the warehouse during summers. Leah required him to apply through human resources like every other student. His first job was cleaning reusable pallets on the morning shift. I arrived one day with lunch and found him arguing with a supervisor about a blocked fire exit. The supervisor cleared it. "Lots of exits," Caleb told me. "Always," I said. The company changed too. Within 3 years, the medical storage division accounted for 34% of revenue. We did not become a national empire. We remained a profitable regional business with 111 employees, an employee trust that owned 23%, and no executive able to approve a related party payment alone. Leah served as chief executive but tied part of her compensation to employee retention and safety compliance, not merely profit. Nina Brooks became president. Walter Kim chaired the risk committee for 2 terms, then retired and returned twice a month to complain about how retirement was being managed. Paula Green's 2-year chair term became 3 at the board's request. When she stepped down, the board selected an independent logistics professor with no Avery family connection. I remained a director until my 75th birthday. At my final meeting, the board gave me a framed copy of the company's first delivery invoice. Margaret's handwriting appeared at the bottom, paid in full, with gratitude. I held the frame and thought of the photograph Grant had removed from Leah's house to copy a signature. Handwriting can be evidence of fraud or evidence of a life. The difference is the purpose of the person holding it. "Speech," Walter called from the back. I stood. "For many years," I said, "I thought founding a company meant I was responsible for preserving it. I was wrong about the verb. A founder begins something. Other people decide whether it deserves to continue. I thanked the employees, the board, and Leah. I did not compare her to Margaret. I did not tell everyone the company was my family. A workplace should not demand the obligations of blood. I said it was a company where people had chosen to build useful work together, and I was grateful. Afterward, Leah handed me a cardboard box containing 2 pens, a spare tie, and the emergency crackers I kept in my desk. "You know you're still allowed in the building," she said. "I was hoping for a security escort. That can be arranged. Retirement the second time was quieter." I volunteered with a small business mentoring program and helped owners build succession plans that did not depend on family assumptions. I told them to verify signatures, separate authority, document loans, and never confuse a child's love with willingness to inherit a job. I also learned to cook for one without treating every meal as evidence of loneliness. On Sundays, Leah and the children often came over. Sometimes they did not. I stopped interpreting a canceled dinner as distance. We made another plan. The support group continued. Samuel became a friend. We met for breakfast on the first Tuesday of each month and discussed everything except trauma until one of us needed to discuss trauma. Elena moved from Juniper Lane 4 years after the trial. Her knees made the stairs difficult, and she wanted to live closer to her daughter in Fredericksburg. At her farewell gathering, the neighborhood presented her with a brass key mounted in a shadow box. The plaque read, "For knowing when to open a door and when to keep one closed." Elena laughed and called it too dramatic. Leah hugged her for a long time. "You saved my life," Leah said. Elena shook her head. "You got out of the car. You crossed the fields. You knocked. I opened a door. That was enough." Elena looked at me. We both remembered the gate, the rain, and her raised hand. "Sometimes enough is everything," she said. The criminal appeals lasted years. Grant challenged the search warrants, Melissa's agreement, and the prosecutor's use of the complete journal passage. The conviction was affirmed. A later petition claimed ineffective assistance of counsel. That too was denied. We learned not to treat each filing as a new emergency. Miriam summarized them. Leah chose what to read. The children were told only when something could affect them. When Grant had served 5 years, he sent Leah a letter through an approved legal channel. It was 12 pages long. He admitted the forged emails, financial fraud, and attempt to push the Subaru into the lake. He still claimed he had believed Leah escaped before the car entered the water. He asked to begin a restorative justice process with Sophie and Caleb. The children were 19 and 16. The court no longer controlled Sophie's choice. Caleb's therapist advised waiting. Leah read the letter once. "Do you believe him?" I asked. "I believe he has admitted what the evidence already proved. Will you answer?" "No." Sophie chose to receive 1 letter a year through a counselor, with no obligation to respond. Caleb chose no contact. Their choices differed, and neither was treated as betrayal. Diane struggled with that distinction. She had rebuilt a limited relationship with both children by following the rules, but Grant's letter revived her hope of reunion. She asked Sophie to reply for Caleb too. Sophie ended the visit and did not see Diane for 3 months. Diane apologized without explaining herself. Visits resumed. That was how boundaries worked in our family now. They were not threats announced once. They were consequences applied consistently, followed by another chance only when behavior changed. Leah never remarried during the years covered by this story. She dated eventually, carefully, and privately. The first man she introduced to us was a pediatric physical therapist named Aaron, who asked before helping carry a heavy dish and did not seem offended when Leah said she could manage it. I liked him immediately and distrusted my immediate approval, so I said little. After dinner, Leah asked, "Well?" He returned my serving spoon to the correct drawer. "That's your assessment?" "I am trying not to investigate him," she laughed. "A background check would be reasonable, Miriam already." Her face changed. I let the silence last 2 seconds, then smiled. "That was a joke." Leah threw a napkin at me. Aaron remained in her life, though neither of them rushed to define what that meant. I learned that hope did not require a deadline. On the 6th anniversary of the lake, Leah asked me to drive with her to Lake Chesdin. We had never returned together. The public boat ramp had been renovated. New rails lined the slope, and a camera watched the parking area. Families unloaded fishing gear beneath a clean blue sky. Nothing about the place announced what had happened. Leah stood near the water with her hands in her jacket pockets. "I used to think survival meant I had to make this place harmless," she said. "Is it?" "No, it's a boat ramp. Harm is something Grant brought here. We watched a father help his daughter fasten a life jacket. I'm sorry you believed I was involved," I said. Leah looked at me. "You have apologized for the things that made his lie believable. That is not the same." "No, but I need you to hear this. Believing him for a few days was not a verdict on your whole life. It was what isolation did," I nodded. "And I'm sorry I made control feel like love," I said. "Sometimes it was love. Sometimes." We walked back up the ramp. I did not offer my arm until Leah reached for it. That autumn, I revised my estate plan. The old plan had been written when Margaret was alive and Leah was newly married. It left my company shares directly to Leah, divided personal assets between her and trusts for the grandchildren, and named Grant as alternate financial agent if Leah could not serve. Miriam had removed Grant after his arrest, but I had delayed the deeper decisions. "What are you afraid of changing?" she asked. We sat in her office with the river visible between downtown buildings. "If I leave the shares directly to Leah, people may say she benefited from Grant's conviction. People already say things. If I leave them to the employee trust, I take a family asset from her because someone attacked her. Then stop designing your will as a response to Grant." It was irritating advice, which usually meant Miriam was right. I asked Leah whether she wanted the shares. Years earlier, I would have considered that question unnecessary. Parents left businesses to children. Children were expected to be grateful. "Some," she said, "not 41%. Why not?" "Because I'm already chief executive and a major owner." Concentrating more power in me contradicts everything we changed. They are valuable. Value and control can be separated. We developed a plan over several months. At my death, 15% would pass to Leah economically, but half the voting rights would convert to non-voting units. 10% would go to the employee trust over 5 years, funded partly by company redemption. 6% would establish a long-term capital reserve governed independently. The remaining 10% would fund trusts for Sophie and Caleb, who could receive income but no automatic management position. What if one of them wants to work here? I asked. Then they apply, Leah said. Ownership should not be a job offer. The documents required valuations, tax advice, and more patience than I possessed. But when I finally signed them, no one was sedated. No mobile notary rushed through the room, and no family member controlled the explanation. 2 independent witnesses watched. Miriam read each transfer aloud. I took a copy home and placed it in a fireproof safe. Then I told Sophie and Caleb the plan in plain language. Sophie asked whether she could sell her units someday. Under certain rules, I said. Caleb asked whether inheriting shares meant he had to attend meetings. No. Good. Neither child thanked me with tears. Neither promised to continue my legacy. They returned to an argument about music in Sophie's car. Their lack of ceremony relieved me. The plan was meant to support their lives, not script them. A year later, Avery Cold Storage faced a different test. An employee in accounts payable reported that a senior manager had steered maintenance work to his brother's company. The contracts were reasonably priced and the work was good, but the relationship had not been disclosed. No one had forged a signature or planned violence. Some board members wanted a quiet warning because the manager was popular. Leah insisted the audit committee investigate under the same policy created after Grant. The manager admitted the conflict. He had not received money, but his brother's company gained $620,000 in business. The committee suspended him for 30 days, removed his purchasing authority, required competitive rebidding, and published the result internally without naming his brother. Several employees called the response excessive. It isn't Grant again, one supervisor told Leah. That is why we can respond proportionately, she said. But if controls apply only after attempted murder, they are not controls. The brothers' company won 2 of the rebid contracts and lost a third. The manager returned under supervision and later became one of the strongest advocates for disclosure. That episode did more to convince me our reforms would last than any speech. Systems prove themselves on ordinary misconduct, not exceptional villains. Elena's move to Fredericksburg did not end her place in our lives. Leah called her every Wednesday evening. Once a month, Elena took the train to Richmond, and she and Leah ate at a small Greek restaurant without inviting me. I pretended offense. It is a private club, Elena said. What are the membership requirements? Knowing when not to enter. I qualify through remedial education. Application denied. For Elena's 70th birthday, Leah assembled a book of letters from people who had benefited from her quiet interventions. Former students she had helped apply to college, a neighbor whose medications she collected during a storm, a widower she drove to physical therapy, and our family. Elena complained that the book made her sound saintly. You're not saintly, Leah told her. You're occasionally judgmental and your tea is too strong. Better. My letter described only the first 30 seconds on the porch. I did not recount the trial or assign Eleanor responsibility for everything that followed. I wrote, you saw a key in my hand and understood that love plus panic can still damage evidence. You trusted me enough to stop me and trusted Leah enough to let her tell her own story. Thank you for both. Elena read it, folded it carefully, and said nothing. Later I saw it tucked inside her copy of a mystery novel. Diane's relationship with the children remained complicated. When Sophie graduated from college, she invited Diane but asked her not to bring anything from Grant. Diane arrived alone and sat 3 rows behind us. She applauded when Sophie's name was called. At dinner, she gave Sophie a small necklace that had belonged to Diane's mother. This is from my side of the family, she said. No message attached. Sophie accepted it. Caleb was slower. For years, he saw Diane only at holidays in public places. At 16, he asked her one direct question. When did you believe Dad did it? Diane looked toward Leah, then back at Caleb. When I found the tablet, I knew he had lied, she said. At the trial, I knew the rest. I kept hoping there was an explanation because believing him felt like part of being his mother. Did you believe him more than Mom? For too long, Caleb nodded. Okay. He did not hug her, but the next month, he agreed to visit her home for the first time, with his therapist nearby. I once asked Leah whether maintaining contact with Diane was worth the strain. Sometimes, she said. The children should not have to erase half their family to prove they love me. But contact continues only while it is safe. Do you trust her? With a supervised hour, then 2. Trust is measured now. There was no cruelty in that answer. There was no fantasy either. My own health eventually required the sort of conversations I had avoided. At 78, I developed an irregular heart rhythm. Medication controlled it, but my cardiologist advised me to identify people who could help after a procedure. The old version of me would have written Leah's name first and treated her agreement as assumed. Instead, I made a list that included Leah, Samuel, a hired home care service, and transportation provided through my medical plan. I asked each person separately what they could offer. Leah said she could stay the first night and manage meals for 3 days, but she could not cancel a scheduled regulatory inspection. That is enough, I said. Samuel offered transportation. The home care service covered 2 mornings. I paid them from a designated account and kept the invoices, not because I distrusted anyone, but because documented care could never again become a hidden family claim. After the procedure, Leah sat in my living room reading while I slept. When I woke, I apologized for needing help. "Don't make this strange," she said. "I'm trying to respect boundaries." Respecting boundaries does not mean pretending you have no needs. There should be a manual. There is. It's called asking. That evening she heated soup, checked the discharge instructions, and left after Samuel arrived. No one claimed sacrifice. No one converted care into authority. It was simply help, clearly offered and clearly received. I thought of Grant's spreadsheets assigning dollar values to caregiving, grief, and access. He had believed every relationship could be turned into leverage if he identified what someone feared losing. He was wrong about one thing. Once people named the terms honestly, care became harder to steal. When I returned to the support group, I told Samuel the procedure had gone well. "Your daughter fuss over you?" he asked. For one night under a negotiated service agreement. Progress. Apparently. The experience helped me understand why the ordinary phone call years later mattered so much. The most important anniversary arrived without anyone planning it. 7 years after Elena stopped me, I was replacing a loose hinge on my kitchen cabinet when my phone rang. Leah's name appeared. For one irrational second, fear returned exactly as it had that Thursday. "The body remembers before the mind can object," I answered. "Dad, are you busy?" "Only pretending to know carpentry. My car battery is dead. Aaron is with a patient, and roadside assistance says 2 hours. Could you take me to the warehouse?" It was an ordinary request. That was why I nearly cried. "Yes," I said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. 30 is fine. I don't need to be rescued." 25. When I arrived, Leah was waiting on her porch with a travel mug in one hand. For years she had avoided them. This one was bright green and printed with the company's new logo. She locked her door, tested it once, and walked to my car. "Coffee?" I asked. "Tea. Still progress." On the drive, traffic slowed near a school. Leah checked messages while I complained about a delivery truck blocking the intersection. We discussed a refrigeration contract, Sophie's graduate school application, and whether Caleb was actually studying engineering or merely sleeping in an engineering dormitory. Nothing dramatic happened. At the warehouse, Leah unfastened her seatbelt and paused. "Thanks for the ride." "Anytime." She looked at me. "Not anytime. Sometimes you might be busy." "Then I'll tell you." "Good." She entered the building through glass doors bearing her own authorized badge. No forged proxy waited inside. No one had decided she was incapable. She had asked for help, and help had arrived without an invoice, a hidden condition, or a claim on her future. I sat in the parking lot for a moment after she disappeared. For years, people who heard part of our story focused on the arrest in the boardroom. They liked the moment Grant learned Leah was alive. They imagined that was when the truth won. But truth did not win in one moment. It won when Elena preserved a camera recording instead of dismissing what she saw. It won when a landscaping worker stopped for a frightened stranger. It won when a nurse documented injuries, when an employee reported Sunday measurements, when Diane surrendered a tablet despite loving her son, and when jurors placed complete evidence above a polished explanation. It won when Leah returned to work on her terms, when Sophie chose her own name, when Caleb insisted on open exits, when our board built controls strong enough to govern people it trusted, when I learned that supporting my daughter did not require holding every key. The morning Elena stopped me, I believed the truth was inside Leah's house and that I had to open the door to find it. I was wrong. The truth was standing in the rain, telling me to put the key away and cross the street. My daughter was alive because she had escaped, endured, chosen whom to trust, and knocked on the right door. Our family survived afterward because we learned a harder lesson. Love does not grant ownership, fear does not grant authority, and forgiveness does not erase boundaries. Sometimes the person who saves you is not the one who breaks down the door. Sometimes it is the neighbor who says, "Stop," before you destroy what the truth still needs.